The National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, alerts some states in the north, central, and southern parts of the country of a possible overflow of the river Niger and Benue that could trigger flooding in riverine communities. The states that are highly probable are Benue, Kogi, Anambra, Delta, Imo, Rivers, and Bayelsa. A statement by NEMA released on Friday says the notice is to allow local governments and communities to take actions to mitigate the risk of flooding. Some of the actions expected to be taken include immediately constructing temporary flood barriers, evacuating from flood-prone plains to safe higher grounds, and avoiding crossing flooded areas. The agency advised communities to stay informed through weather updates and flood warnings from the Nigeria Meteorological Agency, NIMET, and the Hydrological Services Agency, NISA. The focus on the program today is flooding, mitigating impact. You're welcome to Nigeria Today. I am NIGERIAA Clinton. Now joining us for this discussion is Rukaya Bashir El-Rufai. She's a special advisor to the President on National Economic Council and Climate Change. You're welcome to Nigeria Today.
Thank you for having me.
And also joining us via Zoom from Delta State is Karu Ovemiso, Executive Secretary, Delta State Emergency Management Agency, SEMA. Thanks for joining us, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Now, Carol, I will start with you. The alert has been given, and Delta State is one of the states that has been mentioned as a probable, states. So, how prepared is the government of Delta State in terms of infrastructure and emergency response to deal with flooding?
Well, can you hear me? Yeah, well, Delta State is fully prepared. We started working toward the preparedness of the plan of the flood since we got the alert in February this year. And because of that, the government of Delta State, through His Excellency, the governor, has already established a flood management committee, which is chaired by the secretary to the state government and members captured from the relevant agencies that are managing flood. And as a result of that, a lot of sensitization has been going on. Even upland areas and IDP camps have been identified. And preparedness, we are ready in Delta. Just waiting for the flood to come in place. But from the capturings we have been getting, data have not been impacted recently, but the new system we had, we are hoping, but we are fully prepared because relevant IDP camps have been captured and already prepared to receive people, and people have been told to move to in case there's a flood. A lot of sensitization is going on. Some of the relevant flood communities have been visited and been advised to move up plans. So, and even the state through relevant agencies like Ministry of Environment, Waste Management and all that are working towards clearing waterways and even clearing, distilling drainage and all that. So for Delta State, we are ready for management of the flood.
Thank you very much, Okaru. Now to you, Rukaya. There's something he said there. He said they are prepared, waiting for the flood to come in place. Now, what preventive measures are in place to mitigate the effect of flooding, in high-risk areas? Because they just mentioned some states here, yes. Imo, Delta State, just like we rightly mentioned. The likes.
So preventive. So at this stage, when you think of the cycle of flood management, it's from the preparedness to the response to the mitigation and adaptation. So at this stage, it's really crystallized. The risk of having the flood has crystallized, so it's something to respond to. So this is a response stage. So it's really to ensure that there's search and rescue equipment on site, there's the education, because the early warning is there, is the early action, because it requires a lot of coordination, because even the military is involved. You can imagine the boats and the evacuation, to ensuring that there's access to clean water, and food, temporary shelters, and you know, to just make sure there's health supplies for people, and all that. So those are the more, you know, operational things of helping people cope. But I think what's very important to flood is to ensure the adaptation happens, because that's what will eventually prevent you know, any impact, any negative impact.
When you say adaptation, what exactly do you
so adaptation is you accept those areas as they would have the flooding. So instead of resettlement, it maybe is how you build homes. So look at Lagos, for example, the houses on water and all that. I mean, Netherlands, for example, 29% of Netherlands are underwater, but they have the floodgates, they have the dams, they have so what we're hoping, because His Excellency the Vice President that chairs NEC, you know, under the NEC platform, because NEC is very important for coordination. NEMA, of course, reports to that office. So we've been acutely following flood. There's always been an ad hoc committee. Last year we knew there wouldn't be flood. This year we knew there would be flood based on, we have very good technical agencies, NIMET, that their predictions so far, based on my own personal experience, has been accurate. Last year they said there wouldn't, and there wasn't. This year they said there would. They flagged that 31 states with over 170 local governments are in the high risk, and we're lucky. We have this NEMA leadership. The lady has been very active, the DG. She's been very active going around doing the sensitization, rallying, because it's very important that that response is a community-led. There are meant to be vanguards, community vanguards that are well-trained. It's well simulated, people know the roles to play, and then the behavioral barriers to really, you know, break through. So that's really it, is to ensure the humanitarian relief is there right now to prevent the loss of lives. And then after this flood, we make sure that we implement, you know, all the recommendations. There's been robust committees and reports that have been done on flood management in Nigeria. So it's to really ensure that once we weather this year's flood, we really take on the medium to long-term recommendations as well. And, you know, even if fiscal space, budgetary constraint is a problem, there are innovative financing solutions. Now, disaster risk finances is huge, especially with climate change now. For Africa, is about adaptation and helping Africa cope. Africa is already vulnerable. So there is cognizance of helping Africa finance the climate action, climate response, of which, you know, flood is one of the effects of climate change.
Okay, I'll stop you right there, Rukaya, because we're going to come back to some of the things you raised, some of the issues you raised there. Now, back to you, Carol. Rukaya here mentioned behavioral barriers. You know, so to that effect, I would want to, you know, want you to tell us what role do local governments and community leaders, you know, play in educating the public about flood and mitigation?
Normally, when they set up committees like this, The local governments and communities are already aware because there are a lot of stakeholders meetings that go on to capture them and sensitize them on what to do. And the local government involved to always capture them and tell them in the process of mitigation, because recently, because of mitigation things, the local government have been advised to clear flood-prone areas, especially as it affects. You know, sometimes some of these floods are come. It has to do with where drainage are blocked, waterways are blocked, so where water will lead to are blocked. So some of the local government are involved to ensure that these drainages and all those areas cleared. They still there are drainages and all that, so that in the normal relevant areas to flood up, because some of the flood are because the water don't go back to the river and the coastal line, so they retreat down the town. That is where the place are flooded, and the communities are always told that when it comes like this, they try to as much as possible to move upland. And naturally, the state government is involved, and SEMA and are involved, are working seriously to ensure, based on what she has just said, because like he said, mitigation is the greatest issue. It's not about whether or when the flow, because when you mitigate it, even when the impact becomes very low and the effect is reduced. With the Delta State government, if you know the Delta State, some projects over the years going, we have what we call super deck and all these places, doing water storm pouring all over the place in the coastal line. Water bogies are running and clearing all the things. So well, that is our preparedness system with the states presently.
Okay, now back to you, Rukaya. You earlier talked about adaptation. Now, how can communities better prepare themselves for flood-related disasters? Because now,
Yes.
you know, as much as we say they're preparing for the floods, some areas are already experiencing flooding as we
Yes.
speak.
Yes.
You know, so how can they better prepare themselves for those communities that are yet to experience this?
So they need to organize themselves, be alert of the information which always goes out. Like I said earlier, the early warning is not really an issue, it's the early action, and they're organizing themselves, responding, and using it. So let me give you an example. Farming, for example, most local governments, they're quite agrarian at that level, apart from the urban places. So if there is information on flood, they need to engage their SEMAs and some of these technical agencies, so they know maybe we shouldn't do rainy season farming, is dry season farming that we need to do. We need to evacuate, we need to organize ourselves on the search and rescue and all that, and then help with the awareness and when it does happen, this identification to just count. There are apps even now. I mean, at that level, it's too sophisticated, but I think they can do better at helping with the communication and awareness and the accountability, and ensuring that the action is implemented properly when it. So with this one, the communities that are now affected, this is for the ones facing alert now. For the communities that have now, there needs to be reconstruction. Of course, that's beyond them, but still, they need to help with coping mechanisms. And then, they need to also support each other on how they would relocate and just resume lives, where most schools are going back next week. You can imagine dislocation of communities. So even with the schooling system, so they need to organize themselves with the help of course, government and the local the chairman and all. But like I said, adaptation doesn't happen when the flood event crystallizes. It's more about response and just withering through the crisis. Adaptation is meant to prevent, like DG said, it mitigates, so it reduces the impact. Or if maybe a community is because of the drainage, an adaptation will be to make sure you don't even block the drainages, you clear them out, constructing the drainages and just ensuring building plans are adhered to, you know, and those kind of things. So if there's true adaptation, you wouldn't even have the crisis and the displacement. Adaptation makes you, it doesn't if you've truly adapted, it doesn't interrupt you. Like, for example, I gave with Netherlands, you know, that has learned to live, you know, with the events, the flood events.
Now, earlier on, you talked about the long-term solution.
Yes.
So how, what is, you know?
So even dredging of rivers, apparently there's, some of these are quite technical, but apparently dredging some rivers, harvesting flood water, this is another way of resource that can be harnessed. So if you build dams, you gather that water, you harvest it for irrigation, for dry season farming, for example, and those kind of things. So there are lots of ways. So it's really about turning the negative into positive.
Into positive, yeah.
Or
exactly.
making lemonade from lemons. You know, that kind of mindset is the true adaptation. And then planting trees as well. Deforestation causes flooding because the water retention of the soil. You lose that water retention of the soil and so on. So those are the kind of adaptation measures and long-term measures that needs to happen. Changing the building permits and the kind of structures that needs to be put out there. Maybe it's to enforce a mix of the cement to strengthen they're quite technical, you know, engineering and natural interventions and those kind of things. It just means you need to unlearn and look at how to change how you live, how you work, and look for your livelihoods and all that in reality that this is going to happen.
Now, back to you, Carol. I know as much as possible you said how prepared the government is, you know, to ensure that, you know, things are taken care of even when the flood comes. Now, what should the communities be doing at this time? Because the alert has been given, and of course, you know, warnings have been given. Okay, this is what you should do. So what should the communities be doing at this point?
What we told the communities at this point to do is to move upland, because naturally that is only the thing they can do for now, to move up. But you know, this issue of sentimental attachment to homes, to ancestral areas, even when you tell them to move, they still want to wait and see whether the realities will come. So that is why some of us will just be on the alert that even when some of them are not ready for, in case the emergency come, evacuation and all that are set in place to do an immediate evacuation for them. But a lot of them are ready because they have experienced this thing over the years. The president generals of the different communities, the leaders and all that, have been told of the eventuality that may arise if they are not prepared. So resilience is already in place for them. And some of them have even started, because of what has happened recently, some of those communities are even experiencing some flooding. So they're already harvesting their farm product so that they don't get great loss. So that is what they are doing presently.
Now, Rukaya, being the special advisor to the president on, you know, climate change, that's very also important to point out, you know, this point. How is Nigeria addressing the issue of climate change? which experts have often say, they often say that is a contributory factor to, the rising flood risk.
Yes, so it's one of our unfortunate tragedies. That's Africa, because Africa didn't contribute to the greenhouse gases, but we're disproportionately impacted. Be it, maybe because of the vulnerabilities as well, but even with temperature, if the world is, for example, at 30 degrees, we'll be experiencing, most parts of Africa will be experiencing like 60 degrees. So Nigeria has it's a global problem. When they say the tragedy of the commons is a public, the earth doesn't know that this is Africa or this is not Africa, and that's why COP, and the Conference of Parties puts together the whole world to agree on how to tackle it. Just the G5 itself, or G7, if they reduce greenhouse gas, the problem will disappear. They contribute, they're the Pareto here. So, but still, Nigeria has pledged its naturally determined contribution of reducing greenhouse gas by 20%. So it's more about adaptation and mitigation, because climate change is to adapt. You've accepted the impact, and then you prevent, you're mitigating. So adaptation, for example, he spoke about early harvesting, but a mitigation will be even sustainable for changing how you do the agriculture. So Nigeria has its documents, it has its plans. There is, of course, the NCCC. I think now a secretariat. We have the documents. We have our act. There's meant to be, a climate action plan by the NCCC that will be mainstreamed into our development plan, because climate, it's not now a standalone. Climate action is something to integrate across board. So in key sectors, that's why you see now electricity, the energy mix, and they're trying to accelerate, even energizing agriculture with solar-powered pumps, which will help us with this high cost of fuel, the ICNG that you're seeing, renewable energy, and all that. So there are, when it comes to plan, we have the plans. So it's really to implement, even though we have our energy transition plan, we've pledged to be net zero. And of course, there are many afforestation projects. We have the Great Green Wall, because that planting of trees is also a very good nature-based solution to floods. So there are, of course, there is the committee, there is a jury, there is the appointed climate envoy. Mostly my roles are within the office of the vice president, and then of course at NEC we try to integrate it. So you can see, for example, this ad hoc committee on flood that was chaired by Governor Odudu, where we are trying to integrate climate action, but from a developmental perspective. In everything we do, climate has become a lens to integrate. So it's no more like a standalone solution. That's why even if you go to the Climate Change Act, you'll see that the mandate is to integrate it into our development plans.
Thank you very much, Rukaya, because I know you have quite a lot of information to give to me. Thank you very much. We have to draw the curtain on today's program of Nigeria Today. Very big thank you to Rukaya Bashir El-Rufai, the Special Advisor to the President and National Economic Council, NEC, and Climate Change. Thank you so much for your time and your contribution.
Thank you for having me.
And also we had via Zoom from Delta State, Caro Ovemeso, Executive Secretary, Delta State Emergency Management Agency, SEMA. Thanks for your time. Even though we couldn't see you, but at least we heard your voice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would have loved to be seen, but I don't know what happened to the video. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
And thank you for being part of the program. Don't forget, Nigeria Today airs every weekday at 7:30 p.m. on NTU News 24. You can also check out this episode and others on www.youtube.com/NTU News 24 Hub. Once again, thank you for watching. I am NIGERIAA Clinton. Have a wonderful weekend.